Hello there, I'm Capote, and in this video I'm going to be going over all of the E.G.Os we've seen coming in Season 2 of Limbus Company, and talk about their origins based on the Abnos, and the possible effects of those E.G.Os based on the little we've seen. And we're going to start out with what's probably the main Abno being shown with Season 2, that being the Stray Fox and its E.G.O Sunshower. So, a sunshower is a meteorological term for when it is raining while still being sunny out, which you can see here pretty clearly in the actual Yi-Sung E.G.O with the rain and the sun. And there is another meaning to sunshower, however, because there's a Korean myth, and in it there's a fox and a tiger who get married, but in turn there was a cloud who loved the fox, and this cloud began to cry due to the fact that he no longer can get his love. However, out of the kindness of the cloud's heart, it decided to do it behind the sun as to not ruin the wedding of the tiger and the fox. This can also be further seen in the fact that the three sinners who we know have Sunshower E.G.Os definitely they've got spouses in their books, and quite a few of them have complicated relationships, especially Yi-Sung and Heathcliff. And, Otis, and definitely still Otis too, just not as much of a... still drama though, so it definitely fits all three of them, I feel. So the actual Stray Fox Abnormality event doesn't seem to go too much into this, as it seems to just be a fox impaled by umbrellas, and there's no mentions of any sort of tigers or clouds or even sunshowers itself there. That's just what the E.G.O's called. So, however, if we look at the E.G.O gift of Sunshower, which is a case of an E.G.O gift sharing the exact same name as the E.G.O itself, it has a very simple power, that being everyone gets +2 skill powers when you get a Sloth Absolute Resonance. And that doesn't give us too much insight into what the E.G.O itself could be, other than the fact that it's almost certainly going to be Sloth, since it's an E.G.O gift that's so heavily reliant on the Sloth. However, I would still believe if it was instead something like Gloom, as I feel like that would also very well fit the mood of the story. So going through the actual different attacks we've seen, Otis's version of the E.G.O seems to be relatively straightforward. It's definitely got its charm, but it doesn't seem to be too over the top, which leads me to think there's a very decent chance it is just going to be a damage-based Teth E.G.O, possibly doing something like maybe like reducing the target's Sloth defense, something like that possibly. And I think that would fit pretty much. I don't know for sure, though. It's hard to say. It seems like a pretty standard attack. But Yi-Sung's, on the other hand, is very interesting. It's got probably the most unique attack animation we've seen for an E.G.O yet. As you can see all the different sinners in the background, and then they're being protected by the umbrellas before the rain comes in, which makes me think that this is probably going to be a E.G.O. And there's also the fact that Yi-Sung's Sunshower seems to be like the focused E.G.O of Season 2, similar to how Ryoshu's 4th Match Flame was the focused E.G.O of Season 1, so it feels strange for such an important seeming E.G.O to just be a Zayn or a Teth. But who knows. This E.G.O also does remind me a lot of the story of the Korean myth about the fox and the tiger, as Yi-Sung protecting his allies is vaguely reminiscent of the cloud deciding to cry behind the sun as to not ruin the wedding. I think that could be a little bit of a stretch, but I think you can see how I think there is a connection, and knowing Project Moon, there's almost certainly a connection. They love their mythological tales and their connections to the Abnos. And for the other one we've seen, Heathcliff, we barely see it in the recent promotional video, so we don't know its animation itself or what it does. I think there's a decent chance it would just end up being a Teth, if anything. And there's also the fact that it doesn't say whether or not it's on the Battle Pass, so there's a very decent chance that this one would just be a gacha E.G.O. But I think that's all I have to say about the Sunshower. So let's move on to the Bronze Bull and its E.G.O Capote for both Meursault and Ishmael. So this Abno is very interesting because you can see it in what seems to be some of the cutscenes for Canto 4 and on the actual map itself. It also has, it's similar to the Stray Fox. The Bronze Bull has a origin rooted in mythology. However, in this case, not Korean mythology, but Greek mythology. So it's a torture method, quote unquote, called the Brazen Bull, that it's only known to be used once historically, possibly more times. But basically, so there was a man named Paralaus from Athens who created a hollow brass bowl with a door on one side, and basically the thing was someone would be put inside and a fire would be lit underneath the bowl, creating this like horrible torture method. And thanks to a complex series of tubes in the bowl's like head, any of the screams from the person inside would be converted into noises akin to that of a bull screaming. So Paralaus presented it as a means of execution to the local ruler, Phalaris, but Phalaris was horrified by the idea, thinking it was too inhumane even for him. And so he tricked Paralaus into entering the brass bowl by being like, "Oh, is that true? Does it really sound like a bull? Could you go in and do it?" And then Paralaus was like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll go into the bowl." And Phalaris then closed the door on him and turned it on. However, out of, I guess, the kindness of Phalaris' house, more so just because he didn't want to be as monstrous as the thing, he let out Paralaus before he actually died within it, but I mean, still threw him off a cliff later. And there are some tales of Phalaris himself eventually dying within the bull at the end of his reign, or stuff like the bull being used to persecute Christians by Romans, but it's hard to say for sure, and I think that's straying a bit far away from the actual Abno itself, because I think I've put enough thought into this backstory. So the bronze bull, Abno itself, appears to be a brazen bull with a person inside of it, trying to get out, stuck in the agonizing pain. And in the Abno event itself, you're given the choice to give water to the person or not, but either way, even if you do give the person water, it'll evaporate before they get it, so it kind of further serves as this like horrible torture device and the cruel nature of it. The E.G.O gift of the bronze bull is the commemorative coin, which just allows a single coin skill to be played twice, once per turn, as long as it didn't get a kill. This doesn't seem to be very relevant to the actual E.G.O itself, but it does make it seem that because of the fact that the commemorative coin is a lost E.G.O gift, there's a... Oh no, it's sloth, isn't it? Yeah, it's a sloth E.G.O gift. Why am I saying... mistype. Oh well. It's a sloth E.G.O gift, which makes it... There's a decent chance the Capote E.G.O is sloth, but I think there's also a high chance of it being wrath or lust, especially. Just because of the fact that it's heavy focus on fire, and the fact we're probably going to be well set on sloth E.G.Os with the 3 Sunshowers. So the E.G.O itself, Capote, it's for both Mersault and Ishmael, and the Awakening E.G.O displays itself like a Matador, and the Corrosion E.G.O is more like them getting the powers of a bull itself. So, I really wish I knew where it was, but there was a really interesting post someone made on Twitter analyzing the Matador stuff in detail, like the outfits and like a lot of the background of it, because of the fact I think that person like had like some sort of close ties with bullfighting, but I can't find it anymore. If any of you know where it is, please leave a link below and I'll put it into like the description. But so I think the E.G.O itself doesn't seem to be as relevant to the story of the Brazen Bull as much as it is between the Matador and the bull and bullfighting. But however, the E.G.O is very fire related, which is very similar to the Brazen Bull and the actual Abno itself being the bull lit a flame. So there is a decent chance there are burn related E.G.Os. However, there have been a lot of burn related E.G.Os recently. There's still a chance that they are, but they might have some other gimmick too, possibly something akin to bullfighting, like one-on-one type stuff, but it's hard to say for sure. Capote itself, the animations make me think it's a he E.G.O, but it very well still could be Teth, and personally, this is more personal, but I really hope it is Teth, because if you have it a he, then you have to compete with Mersault's Pursuance and Ishmael's Ardor Blossom Star, which is a lot rougher than having to compare with Mersault's Hurtley E.G.O and Ishmael's Pink Shoes E.G.O. But I think that's all I have to say about the Bronze Bull. So now to move on to the Electric Centipede and its E.G.O, AEDD, for both Heathcliff and Gregor. So before we get into the Abno, the acronym AEDD, the name of the E.G.O, is I believe something to do with, so AED is an automated external defibrillator, or just called a defibrillator for short, which is one of those like machines people like rub together and then put on people's chests to like jumpstart their hearts when they're having issues. However, because of the fact there's an extra D in it, I can't seem to figure out what that could stand for. There's a lot of things it could stand for, but this Abno, it's hard to tell based on what we know of it. Because this Abno isn't based on any sort of mythology as far as we know. It's probably a O abnormality or original abnormality. And in case you don't know what that is, quick explanation. Each abnormality has like a little letter in their classification, stuff like F being for fairy tale and T being for trauma. However, O abnormalities don't have a basis in stuff like that and instead have their own like unique basis. And I think in this case there's a very high chance that its basis has to do with W Corp, similar to the Lost Passenger. You can see this on the E.G.O gift, the standard duty battery, and how it has the W Corp logo on top of it. So the fact that we're getting a second abnormality related to W Corp so close to each other definitely makes me think there's going to be some sort of W Corp involvement sometime soon. But I don't know for sure. So the actual, and another thing to support this is the fact the outfits of the E.G.O itself are these like very blue lab coats, which makes me think it's possibly some sort of W Corp scientist, as opposed to the Lost Passenger being a W Corp cleanup crew member. It's also it also seems to be another charge / rupture related E.G.O, which having Telepole and the Lost Passenger E.G.O coming so recently makes me definitely very interested in the abundance of charge. As far as the fact that it's a charge E.G.O for both Heathcliff and Gregor, Heathcliff does have a charge identity, that being Rabbit Heathcliff, and Gregor does not. However, we've known that Rhino Gregor is a thing that will exist at some point for a while. There's artwork of it, I think, like on the website, and even in-game, if you try and use a 3-star guaranteed ticket, you can see Rhino Gregor there. So I think there's a high chance we're going to be getting Rhino Gregor soon to pair with the Electric Centipede AEDD E.G.O. There's no evidence behind this beyond the fact that it's, well, another charge seeming thing. I mean, it's not like the Lost Passenger E.G.Os were given to people with charge E.G.Os, but the fact that Heathcliff does and Gregor doesn't have a charge identity makes me think there's a high chance of Rhino Gregor. Going back to the E.G.O itself, I think Gregor's AEDD is almost certainly going to be a he E.G.O. It is definitely another very over-the-top attack animation, very fancy, with his arm kind of like splitting up into a bunch of different pieces. But Heathcliff's, on the other hand, is very simple compared to it, so I think that might be a Teth E.G.O, but at the same time, I think there's also a decent chance that is a he too, because if it was a Teth, then Heathcliff would have 2 charge E.G.Os, both a Teth in form of AEDD and a he in the form of Telepole, so I think there's a decent chance that this one will be he as well. Also means that Heathcliff is going to be one of the 2 people who we already know of 2 identities that are going to be showing up for them this season, although one of them we don't know if it's on the battle pass, so who knows. So that's the 3 that we've actually seen a lot in depth, but the recent promotional video did show 2 other E.G.Os, and I think we can go slightly into depth with them. Those being the Fairy Gentleman E.G.O for Ishmael and the So That No One Will Cry E.G.O for Sinclair. So for the Ishmael one, the Fairy Gentleman seems to be some sort of, well, it seems to be an aberration of Fairy Fountain from Lobotomy Corp and Ruina, although we don't know for sure. And it seems like there's a decent chance it'll be a Gluttony Tremor-based E.G.O, and because of the fact that the Fairy Fountain is one of the very few Zayn abnormalities that aren't tools in LobCorp, there's a decent chance that this ends up being a Zayn E.G.O, I feel. And so the Gluttony and Tremor part is because of the fact that the actual relevant E.G.O gift is a Gluttony and Tremor focused E.G.O. So I think there's a decent chance that because of that, the Fairy Gentleman E.G.O will also be like that. And I feel like that fits because Ishmael's got a fair bit of Tremor stuff and a fair bit of Gluttony stuff. I feel like in this situation it would pair really well with LCCB Ishmael. And the other thing about this is if Ishmael does get this on the Battle Pass, then she would also have 2 Battle Pass things, being her Capote and her Fairy Gentleman, but the Fairy Gentleman very well could also be a Gotcha E.G.O similar to Heathcliff's Sunshower and the So That No One Will Cry E.G.O for Sinclair. Moving on to the So That No One Will Cry E.G.O, this E.G.O gift is So this abnormality is like a person or a doll covered in talismans, and the ego gift was Sloth with a heavy focus on rupture, so I think there's a decent chance that'll match the ego, although not certain though. Because of the fact that it's all these talismans, which are objects that are thought to be bringing good luck, I think there's a very high chance it's going to be a buff-focused ego, either buffing Sinclair or his allies, or possibly debuffing the target, which definitely sounds very likely because of the fact Sinclair's egos so far have been pretty support-heavy, with both his impending day and his Stu ego being focused on healing his allies. But yeah, that's all for the egos we've actually seen so far. But before we end the video, I want to go over some egos that we have seen teasers for in the past, but not recently. There's just 3 egos we've seen that we haven't heard anything about since we've seen them. Some of which have a lot more, well, believability than others. The most believable one that could come sometime is the Hole in the Man ego, which is that weird guy who shoots himself. This is one that was actually posted on their Twitter, and it's the only one that they've actually kind of brought attention to. Now, do I think this ego is going to be soon? I don't think particularly because of the fact Mersault already has a lot of unique egos, and he's going to be getting Capote, so I don't think there's a high chance we get this anytime soon. But who knows, maybe. Now the next one is this 1/4 Match Flame seeming ego that's shown on the website. Now you can barely see it. It seems to be either Dawn or Sinclair. It's hard to tell. If I had to guess, I'd say I honestly don't know. The weapon looks more like Dawn, but the actual person itself looks more like Sinclair. But either way, I don't think we're going to be getting this one anytime soon because of the fact we're already getting Capote and there's already a lot of burn egos. And 4th Match Flame is, well, like the standard burn ego. Now the third and the last one to bring up this video is, this one's very vague, and we haven't even seen it on a center itself. It's just more so the fact that I've seen this brought up sometimes, but this artwork for the Alleyway Watchdog does show a halberd telepole, and the halberd is Sinclair's weapon of choice, so it may be hinting at the possibility of telepole Sinclair. Now we already have 3 telepole egos, and it doesn't seem to be that important of a one, and we don't even see an ego itself. I just wanted to bring this up in case people thought about it. I think this one isn't even like confirmed to exist in the slightest. It's just concept art. It very well could just be for someone else, like Dawn, for all. Oh, no, it wouldn't be for Dawn. It could have been concept art for Dawn, then, who knows? But anyway, that's the last part of the video. So, there's a decent chance that soon there's going to be some sort of update talking more about the ego, and in that case, there's, a high chance this video is outdated very soon, but I wanted to make it now to provide a little bit of a backstory into what we know so far, and the egos that we're going to be getting soon. But yeah, that'll be all for this video. If you watched to the end, thank you for watching, and yeah, bye.